Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you, aka VHS82 apostrophe, with episode 2 of my ongoing series, Italy's Holocaust. Taking a look at the films between 1979 and 1994, beginning with Fulci Zombie and ending, of course, with Michele Soavi's Della Morte dell'Amore, and everything that comes in between. Compliments of Jim Harper and his book, Italian Horror, that does exactly what I just said. It covers that time period. The introduction is really good. I suggest if you really like Italian cinema and you don't have that book, it's a good book to have on your shelf. I'm gonna, keep my eyes open continually for more resources. Actually, just pick this one up, Tear on Tape, that deals with everything VHS related up to 1994. And I've already found that to be very interesting. Just got it today. So anyways, last time I looked at Witchery, which I found wanting. Thought I would just stay with the Scream Factory double feature release and fall back on the other side of that La Casa equation and talk about a movie that I really do love, even all these years later. Jim Harper's book, makes a point to, right off the bat, to refer to it as a Amityville horror ripoff, but one that seems to be better than the sequels that will come out down the road. I think I probably agree with that. The Italians were ripping everyone off, man. They were ripping each other off. I mean, you think about this movie, Ghosthouse, by Umberto Lenzi, comes out in 1988, and the main filming location is in Fulci's house, from his house by the cemetery. In fact, the music in this thing was pretty much stripped off of Simon Boswell's score for Stage Fright. So, if they're not cannibalizing each other, they're, of course, cannibalizing American film and capitalizing, in this series, especially, La Casa and La Casa 2 really are Sam Raimi's two films, Evil Dead 2. And so this really is marketed to follow after as a third piece. And Lenzi will say that it's probably why the movie did as good as it did. Now, and it's surprising that if it really did as well as he says it down, no reason to suggest he's lying. It is interesting that he felt shot down as quick as he felt when he offered up the possibility of taking this where La Casa 4 ought to go. And ultimately it doesn't go his direction. So he moves on to other things. And the end effect, of course, is Witchery, a real failed experiment, if I might just say. And I love Italian cinema, but I can't remember the last time I put on an Italian piece of work and I was, less than satisfied. Anyways, Ghosthouse. Umberto Lenzi, 1988, released initially under the Imperial label back on the VHS glory days. Over in Italy, of course, it was released by Medusa. Of course, I got this via Amazon Italy because there was no good release of this at all, and so I went that way, and I tell you, that was rewarding. Now it's all in Italian in the back, even though these days with your phone you can translate this mess, right? And it's not a perfect translation, but it's one that is interesting, and so I did translate it and read the back of it, and they give credit to Sam Raimi, and it talks about how this is sort of going off in that sort of similar direction, which is interesting. And so La Casa 3, man, Humphrey Humbert or Umberto Lenzi. I think that Alias was as much for American audiences as it was for Italian audiences, because the horror films just weren't a big thing in Italy. In fact, by the end of the decade, with the growth of Italian TV, horror cinema is very quickly coming to an end, and all these guys are having to find jobs in the world of TV, which is really sad. But then Scream Factory, of course, came along with their double feature, and it shares a spot with Witchery only because it's La Casa 4. But I'm going to just say, man, Ghosthouse is the superior film. Yes, I will use the word superior. There is a lot to be enjoyed with Ghosthouse. And, one of the things that Harper says in his book is that, one of the things found wanting is, in his eyes, it doesn't seem like Lenzi brings anything new to the table. And so it's sort of, he never calls it a bore fest or anything like that. He does refer to it as very entertaining. And and one of the better films from Italy towards the end of the decade. So he's not really overly critical of it. You know, it does, you know, cannibalize off of, you know, whether it's Amityville Horror, whether it's Poltergeist, whether it's, actually, yeah, Poltergeist. I was just thinking to myself, Poltergeist was 82 and 80, yeah, so, I'm trying, there was another movie that comes up, can't think what it was, but anyways, and so, you know, he's a little down on it, but, you know, not really, but in terms of bringing something interesting to the table, there are some really interesting things, I think, to be had here in this film. But let me get the negatives out of the way, and there's only a couple, man. Peppy, the character of Peppy, I cannot stand that character as it is written. Serves no purpose, only serves to undermine the film and what this film really could have been in terms of its, this, you know, go for the throat type that it could have been. And so, you know, this character, boy, if there's one thing I could just take out of this movie right now, it would be that entire character, or have it completely and absolutely rewritten. But I think part of the problem is they were trying to cater too heavily to an American audience, and it's not enough. I mean, you know, some of the Italian movies, even the early 80s, were being filmed here in the United States. They weren't necessarily catering to audiences with how stupid the characters were, or how badly written they were, or whatever the case was. I mean, there's no way you could say that City of the Living Dead is catering to American audiences. Or is House by the Cemetery, or, you know, any other number. When I'm a kid, 14, or my teenage years, and I'm renting this stuff out of the video store, I don't feel like, that's the last thing I feel like that somebody is catering to me. If anything, I'm being blown out of my mind by, you know, by the scores, by the visuals, by just the absolute uniqueness that this movie is bringing, comparably speaking to everything else that I'm being bombarded with here, you know, growing up in the United States here throughout the 80s. And so Italian cinema, I wasn't wise enough back then. I mean, I had Fangoria in my hand, I had Gore Zone in my hand. By the way, Gore Zone number 5 has Ghosthouse on its cover piece. I don't know if any of you have that in your collection or not, but there was quite a bit in this movie that left its indelible mark on me, and enough so that for a lot of years I often confuse this movie with Fulci's House by the Cemetery. Now that is the superior film to this film, but probably because it was shot on the same location. You know, there were a number of years that went by that I often confused the two. And maybe it helps too that some of the visual sequences are pretty, I don't know, stunning might be a too grand of a word, but they do go to some effect. You know, so, I mean, you know, Peppy catering to American audiences maybe a little too much with its writing and its characters, but also ripping off Boswell's stage fright score is really unnerving to me. I love stage fright, and so it's hard for me to really enjoy a movie from its start to its end when all I'm thinking about is how much I want to watch stage fright. But that's what these guys did, man. You know, with Hell of the Living Dead, I mean, they pretty much, you know, not that they ripped off, because they did license it through a third party, but, you know, getting the music from Goblin off of Dawn of the Dead and Contamination, you know, although I think that music works much better over there than I think stage fright music works here. You know, but I mean, so those are some of the lesser gripes I have. I still love it, man. I think it's the visual. You know, I think Lovecraft said, you know, it's the visual should outweigh the mechanics of plot and structure. And I think this is a movie that tries to be a little bit too linear. It could have gone a much further had it just followed a much non-linear path that Fulci was known for, at least with his Gates of Hell trilogy, and just relied more on the visuals. This does go to some effect at trying to string together a story, a mystery about a house. If you've never seen Ghosthouse, really basically what you have here is a ham operator. You got Paul and Martha. They live in Boston, and he's always on his ham radio. And he intercepts one night trying to talk to his buddy in Denver, intercepts a message. It's not really a message, it's like a transmission, and it just sounds like somebody is about to be killed and is killed. And it's, you know, it's a little blood curdling for them, but he's, cut out of the fold of Scooby-Doo, I guess, in a way. He feels a need to investigate this. And so he figures out some way of pinpointing, using his computer, the source of the transmission. And so when him and Martha show up at the house, they do find a ham radio up in the attic, but this house has been abandoned for years. And there's a group of other people. There are three siblings and a girlfriend attached. There are two brothers and a sister. And Mark is his girlfriend. Mary Sellers, of course, is Susan. Yeah, she, of course, is from Stage Fright as Laura. And so you have the convergence of these characters at this house. And of course, everything starts to go nutty. But there's more than just the house. You do have a prologue at the beginning of a girl who's down in her cellar with a doll, and sort of a poltergeist, evil-looking doll that is possessed, assumably, is possessed and has possessed her to do some not-so-kind things at the start involving a cat. Her dad comes down the steps looking for her, and finds the dead cat on the stairwell, sees her with bloodied scissors, and does the strangest thing, man. To punish her, he locks her in the cellar. Never quite understood that, but you find out later he worked at the mortuary. He stole the doll from somebody that was going to be buried. Probably not the best, smartest thing to do. But it's in that early prologue, you see him and his wife are both brutally murdered by an unseen assailant. One can imagine, is it the ghost of this possessed clown doll? Is it the person that was being buried? It sort of reminds you of House by the Cemetery a little bit, but they are both murdered pretty brutally. And from there on, this house sort of becomes a legend. It's, nobody will buy it. And the state does something really useful. They'll take Valkros is his name, guy from that is in Zombie Holocaust that plays the doctor. He is being released. I think he was a murderer, killed somebody, maybe, I don't know. But the state decides to pay him to basically be the caretaker of this property. I think what they think is probably no one's ever going to buy this thing. Why they don't burn it down, I don't know. But let him basically just live there or hang out there, take care of it, whatever. So he sort of becomes a part of this plot, as well as an antagonist. You've got the ghost girl with her doll, becomes an antagonist. The house is sort of its own character. You've got the backdrop story to the father, and never really learning why he did what he did. Just assuming that he didn't have all of his, marbles in place. And so there is a bit of a backdrop story, a little bit of intrigue, a little bit of an investigation on the part of Paul and Martha, and the murders, the set pieces. The guy who we hear on the ham radio at the beginning, how he dies is pretty, not near as brutal as some of the other set pieces, but they all will fall to their own death, and some more visually stunning than others. But they're not getting out of this place, man. No one's going to get out of this place. Well, I shouldn't say that. A couple do ultimately get out, but to what end? I'll leave that in the air. And so it does offer some fun, intriguing concepts. The ham radio as a concept is intriguing. I don't know if it was utilized as well as it could have been utilized. I'm not sure, but it is an interesting part of the story. The whole backstory with the father. Even Valkros is a character. He plays a fun character, man. I think he was underutilized. And the trip to the cemetery by Paul and Martha, and their investigative efforts, all lead them to the grave of Henrietta, who is the girl who, of course, kills the cat at the beginning. And, what to do, how to end all of this stuff, right? And and the stuff that reminds me of one of the visually very intriguing death sequences. Involves one of the brothers falls through the floor into this vat of like white guff and acts as an acid, and just it's one of the more entertaining pieces to this film. So I mean, what else to say about? I mean, so there's a lot to enjoy, man, and there's a lot to be intrigued by. I mean, this would have been a great movie to watch on at the drive-in back in the day. Maybe even paired with Fulci's House by the Cemetery. That'd have been a great double feature one late night. So you know, Lenzi had a good effort, and I think one of the things that Jim Harper in his book Italian Horror might not take into as much account is the effect, you know, because we're talking about 2022, right? So I mean, there's people like me, man, that rented this movie on videotape way back in the day from a mom and pop shop, and this movie has lived with us. Now, is it House by the Cemetery? No. Is it you know, you learn after time that, you know, there is somewhat the bottom of the barrel in terms of Italian cinema, and then there's the cream of the crop. But then there are those films that seemingly live somewhere in the middle and yet still are entertaining all these years later. And even though there's a few things that really, you know, tend to unnerve me a little bit, it's not near enough. I can still get intrigued, man, by, you know, just, and I guess partly because I'm sitting there watching it and I'm thinking to myself, God, I wish it would have went there. God, I wish I would have went there. Why does Valkyros hang himself in the cemetery? That is a good question. What forces push him to do that? That guy's psychoticness was definitely underutilized. What he does to the poor guy in the mortuary is pretty cool. But creepy. Henrietta, you know, just the visuals of the ghosts. This movie could have done without the ghost dogs. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. And it's, you know, so is it perfect Italian cinema? No, not by any stretch. Is it a entertaining watch? Absolutely. And there's some intriguing concept that, yeah, might have been underutilized, but they're there nonetheless to have fun with. And so, yeah, Ghosthouse, La Casa 3, Umberto Lenzi, 1988 effort, which, you know, thankfully Scream Factory brought out and paired it with Witchery. Of course, makes sense. Although they probably should have just put La Casa 3 and La Casa 4 so that people understood why they were pairing them up together. But I would say of the first two so far, Ghosthouse is the superior film to the other. It is the one that, as you see, this is what could have happened on Witchery. If Cozy would have been left in place, you might have had a movie closer to Ghosthouse, at least is in terms of its entertainment value. Instead, you have a movie that, quite frankly, really isn't that entertaining to watch. Like most Italian cinema of the day was entertaining and left, you know, just some of it left real indelible marks on the psyche of those of us renting these tapes from these mom and pop shops from back in the day, right? So anyways, Ghosthouse, what do you think? Have you seen it? What do you think about it? When's the last time you watched it? Have you ever watched it in black and white? There is an interesting concept. You ought to watch it in black and white. It does a little bit for it on the positive end of things. So anyways, where do we go for episode 3? I don't know. I haven't even given it any thought. But I guess I will once I'm done with this. So there you go. I hope you're enjoying this. I hope this is worth me doing. I'd like to think someday, you know, there's a someday out there when I can't believe I've just hit like my 25th, 26th one. We'll see. We'll see where all this goes. But tell me what you think. Drop a comment, hit the like button. Appreciate the subs, the new subs that have come along, all those who've been with me for so long. Appreciate it. Thank you much. Always end these things off with Go Bills.
This is not a dream. Not